My mother, Lois Kirk, was a unique intellect. At her memorial service, let's see, there were 4 ex-wives at this memorial service for my mom. 2 of my ex-wives, and plus the gal I was married to at the time. And then my brother's ex-wife was there, and then her grandson's ex-wife was there. So my ex-wife said that when we were like 18 years old, and she took Damon to my mom for babysitting while she went to college, my mom said, "What are you going to take in college?" And Ruth said, "I don't really know." And my mom said, "Well, you have to take chemistry." "Why do I have to take chemistry?" So my mom sat her down with the periodic table of the elements and unrolled some of the mysteries of, like, why is it that potassium and sodium are such very different elements. They have different atomic weights, different protons and electrons, and yet they act in very similar ways. When mixed with chloride, they taste like salt, both of them. So Ruth took some chemistry. She stood up to say all this at my mom's memorial service. She took some chemistry, and then she took some more, and she graduated with a PhD in biochemistry. And then at the time of this service had been teaching for 20 years chemistry and biochemistry. Now another gal, Janet Yoder, who'd gone to high school with us, she didn't stand up to say it, but she approached me later to say that she had brought something to our house that her mother sent to deliver to my mother, and noticed that all over the kitchen table were books about Mesopotamia. And, well, why do you have all these books? And my mom said, "Well, I realized that I didn't know anything about Mesopotamia, but I'd heard it all my life, so I thought I better study up on it." So that to Janet, that was the first time that she had ever considered that she might want to study something for a purpose other than an upcoming test. My son Damon at the memorial service described that he had brought his new bride, maybe fiance, probably new bride, to meet his grandmother at 1226 Perry Loop. And it was a hot day, and my dad there was an air conditioner, but my dad kept it in his bedroom, and it wasn't big enough to do the whole house. So in the sweltering heat of eastern Washington, my mother comes to the door to greet Damon and Christine, comes to the door in some polyester slacks and a brassiere, and that's it. So she gives Damon a big old sweaty hug with her brassiere. Okay, so she was a little bit eccentric. And then I can't remember why she ran for the school board. She usually got talked into things. A friend of hers came to the house one day and said, "I need to go to Central Washington University and get a teaching degree, so I don't want to go alone, so I want you to go with me." And my mom said, "Well, I don't want to do that." "Well, you have to." So Ruth Cainrad and Lois went off and got teaching degrees in Ellensburg. So my mom probably got talked into school board. So there was a debate going on where they were going to, they needed budget cuts, and so they were going to cut the money that they were spending on the ski bus. And my mom said, you are unstinting in your funding of boys' sports, basketball, football, and the only thing you've got for girls is the ski bus, so you will cut that funding over my dead body. I gotta love my mom for that. She would go absolutely apeshit about pedestrian rights and pedestrian issues. And it pretty much boiled down to that she never did learn to drive. And the biggest reason why she never learned to drive, the neighbor took her out, tried to teach her, but you know, she needed to learn to drive our car, which was a manual transmission, which is difficult. And so my dad would try to teach her, and his what do you call it, the teaching technique. Anyway, his teaching technique was that anytime she made any kind of mistake, he would just screech at her and call her a dumb shit. And so I think she developed PTSD from his driving lessons. And so she never learned how to drive, and that pretty much limited her. You know, here's my brother and I, and then a neighbor kid that she took care of because his mother worked all day, and we were always cutting each other open somehow, bleeding, whatever. And Mom couldn't do anything. She couldn't take us, you know, 10 miles into town to the hospital, and so that infuriated her. And so one day she's at Safeway, and she's got all her groceries there, and she writes out a check, and the gal says, well, I've got to have ID for this check. What the hell for? I've been shopping here for 20 years. Well, I'm sorry, I don't know you. Well, I don't have any ID. Well, you don't have a driver's license? God, don't ask my mom if she has a driver's license. She just went ballistic. And the gal says, well, you can get photo ID from the Department of Licensing. You don't have to have a license. Oh boy, that was bad. You shouldn't have said that. Okay, so one day, every day in the summer, my brother and I would take our bicycles and run across 4 lanes of I think it's SR12 that runs alongside the Columbia Park in Kennewick. So we'd run through these 4 lanes of traffic, and then we had cut a hole in the cyclone fence, and we'd get down to Columbia Park and ride our bicycles down to the lagoon, which is, I don't know, 4 or 5 miles. And so one day a state trooper caught us running across the freeway, and so he told us that was malum prohibitum, and that he needed to know where we lived, and that we should go straight home now, and he would come up there and talk to our mother. So we went home, and he showed up and starts talking to Mom, and Mom says, where is the pedestrian access to Columbia Park? Well, you know, you can go back 5 miles west, yes, and then you got to go 5 miles plus 4 miles to get to the lagoon. Is that correct? Yes. Well, then you could go 5 miles east, and you got to wind your way around through the town of Kennewick, and then backtrack to get back to the lagoon. And my mom says, there is no pedestrian access except what the boys have made, and that's what they're going to use. So I don't think there was any particular crime that the officer could have cited her with. I don't know, and he probably didn't feel it was worth his time to run us over to the juvie. So we just continued. And you know, a few years ago, I was walking to the Commons Mall in Federal Way, and you cut across the street right there at McGrath's Fish House, and there's no sidewalk. So I just tromped in my boots right through all of the vegetation and plantings, and I thought, God bless you, Lois. I'm doing this in your memory. She did a lot of genealogy, and I think my dad burned it all up. She wrote a lot of short stories, and I have most of those, maybe all of them. She did a few watercolors, and I think my dad threw those away. So, hell of a woman.